The president's support among the military is just one of the many topics that I discussed with outspoken Republican critic Rick Wilson earlier today. He is the author of the new book, Everything Trump Touches Dies. Watch. When you watch that and you watch him speak to the military, he got a very positive response there today. What goes through your mind?
Look, Donald Trump has speechwriters like every other president has speechwriters. What I worry about is not what's prepared for him to say at an event like this. What I worry about is the impulsive nature of this president. Because look, I'm not some liberal rhino squish who wants the president to, become, pro-abortion or anything like that. I'm a conservative, and I believe that the power of the presidency is a sacred power. And I believe that the government needs to have a perspective from someone who is a mindful leader and who follows in the traditions of our greatest presidents. And I find that Donald Trump often doesn't meet those standards.
So let me say this. When reading your book,
sure,
that's the thing that really, I think, speaks the loudest. Mm-hmm. What I get from it in many ways is you don't like him. You don't like his style. You're offended by him. And a lot of people that I talk to across the country, I always ask people what they think about the president, as I'm sure you do, as somebody who cares about politics and cares about the country. And what I hear from many people is, I don't like him, but I like his policy. I like what he's doing. And I get it. I hear that over and over. People pull me aside and say, here's what I think. I'm not crazy about him, but I like what he's doing.
I think you're right, Martha. A lot of people like some of the things that are happening because of policy matters, but a lot of those policy things are unfortunately very temporary.
All right, so tell me about the things that he's touching that die. What has died in America?
Everyone who works for Donald Trump at some point is going to hit the wall, and their life is going to turn into one moment they're on the top of the mountain. One moment Omarosa is the best friend in the world, and she's wonderful, and she's in the inner circle. And the next minute, she's wacky Omarosa.
Do you think that Omarosa matters to most Americans? I mean, I talk to Americans who are running businesses in this country, right? You look at the numbers. You look at corporate support for the president, CEO support, small business support, up 14%, up 19%. Consumer confidence is very high under this president. So they look at what's going on, and they're separating out the man from the policies, and they're saying, you know what? I have a lot less regulation on my business. I'm opening a new plant. I'm expanding the people that I am employing here. And I feel like that matters to people that I speak to in the country way more than this other stuff.
Well, look, it may matter to some people about that. But I will say this. We are still sitting on a gigantic ocean of quantitative easing, cheap money from the Fed that started during Obama and continued on.
That's the given when he walked in the door.
It is. I'm not blaming or praising him for it. That has a large economic impact. The fact that we passed a massive tax bill had a stimulative effect, no question about it. Yeah. But it also is going to come with a price tag.
So then how do you explain consumer confidence numbers up 14% under Trump? That's not hedge fund guys. That's guys who run businesses. The majority of the economy in this country, as you well know,
Martha,
is small business. So I'm just asking you this. What died? What died?
Every person that works for Donald Trump.
You said that. What else died?
The fact that the Republican Party used to stand for the rule of law. And we are
what rule of law is?
This is a president who's at war with the FBI, at war with the Justice Department, who believes he operates in an extrajudicial fashion in a lot of different ways. And you see him frequently acting as if he is not a person who works for the people, but he acts more in that sort of status and more authoritarian flavor. And he's got a great deal of affection for that kind of style and that kind of leadership overseas. And I will say this, Donald Trump, he is a character that people bought into. And they love that character. They love the big, broad acting of, acting out his emotions and all that other stuff. And I will say this, the people that have worked for him have come to grief, almost all of them. All these people that were inside, and once they move out, they become unpersoned.
Right, but so, Rick, indulge me here for a second, because you work in Washington, right? You know a lot of these.
I stay out of Washington.
In Florida, okay. You work in politics. You've worked in politics for a long time. Most people in America don't work in politics.
Sure.
So you have a sympathy, perhaps, for people who are in the meat grinder of this process and who don't like it or who have left, right? I'm not sure, again, that is something that has died for most Americans across the country.
The other thing that's died is a Republican agenda beyond the executive order.
So then why do 87% of Republicans support the president?
We have a great tribal system now in this country where there's a tribal media silo on the right and a tribal media silo on the left. And there are very few people left in the center. And a lot of it becomes very self-reinforcing and self-referential. And then there are basically TV networks on the right, TV networks on the left, media on the right, media on the left.
I know, but you know what? I don't give a whole lot of credit to TV networks, even though I work for one. A few million people watch television every day. 120 million people voted in the last presidential election. Most of them are not swayed one way or the other. As much as you and I like to think that we have an impact on what people think or what they read or what they listen to,
I will tell you,
most of us don't have a big impact on their daily lives.
One thing had a big impact. We saw this in a lot of focus groups with voters in 2016. Where you'd sit there and behind the glass and listen to these interviews, and they'd say, "Oh, well, Donald Trump is a decisive leader, and he's a good manager, and he's great at international development. He does all these things." They were listening to the character they knew from television. They watched him on The Apprentice for 14 years, and the character in the White House is a different person. All this impulsive tweeting, all this back and forth, the things that he believes he's accomplished with like Korea. But I'm just saying to you that when
a lot of people out there go, "I don't really care about the tweets." So what do you say to them? I mean, I know it bothers you personally, and I get that.
No,
but when I look across the spectrum, you look at more money going to NATO, you look at shaking the chessboard up with North Korea and Iran, putting them in a different position. And who knows? I mean, the outcome may be disastrous or it may be very good. We don't know the answer to that question yet. So I'm still curious. When you say that everything he touches dies, so far what I've got is, staffers who are unhappy and left and norms.
Well, and also the long-held Republican belief we were going to be the party that gets debt and deficit under control. We were going to be the party that...
Well, that's been a problem for plenty of Republican presidents. And you're absolutely right. President Trump has done nothing to make that better.
And we were also the party that was going to shrink the size of government. And Donald Trump, while there has been some regulatory tweaking, is proposing wild expansions of the size, scope, and power of the federal government in a whole bunch of areas.
But you haven't named anything that he's done that died, essentially, when it comes to the kind of thing that you're talking about. And as I said before, I think
we're still stuck with Obamacare.
Many people may care about the people who work in Washington and work in the White House and think that some of them are nice people and they might be... I'm sorry they lost their job. I'm not sure it's something that they care about when they sit down to dinner. Quick, before I let you go, do you think he would win again if the election were held today?
Well, the Democrats have an infinite capacity to screw up campaigns. So he's got a 3 in 5 chance right now if the Democrats put up, one of the usual suspects.
Interesting. Rick Wilson, thank you very much.
Thank you, Martha.
Good talking to you.